Okay. So sorry for the short delay because we got the new link. A lot of settings had to be changed. We'll get started now. Om. 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 Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrudaduhe Namaha Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rutra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopanisadaihi Gayanti yam samagaha Dhyana vastita tatkatena manasa Pashyanti yam yoginaha Yasyantam na vidusura suraganaha Devaya tasmai namaha Devaya tasmai namaha Sarvadharman parityajya Mamekam sharanam vraja Aham tva sarva papebhyah mokshayishyami ma shuchah. So again, welcome to this session. We are having this almost after 2 weeks. The last one we had was on October 4th. So just to recap where we were basically. So the 8th chapter follows based on the last 2 verses of the 7th chapter. And in the last 2 verses, Arjuna had asked Krishna all those questions. There were about 7 questions that were answered. And in basically the first few verses, Krishna answers literally all the 6 questions. But then there is this last question that Arjuna asks, which is, what happens when somebody is exiting out of this world? At that point in time, what should be really the last thought in somebody's mind? So one may, of course, ask this question, why is Arjuna just asking a simple question like this? What should be the last thought? But if you think about it, it is a very, very profound thought, because it is that thought which kind of gives us a direction to really how our whole life has to be. So the question that was asked was, Prayana Kale cha Katham, what should I do? So he says, Prayana Kale Ishvara Smaranam. So at that point in time, just think about Ishvara. That is what he says. And therefore, Krishna really takes this whole chapter in us thinking about how we have to think about that Ishvara, or how and why, and of course, all the questions that comes in. For us, when we try to reflect upon this one question, the thought that always comes to our mind, right, is really, as I'm leading this life here, there are questions that comes to my mind as, what am I going to do at work today? I know for all of you, it's almost the end of the day, but even if when it's end of the day, the question comes as, okay, how am I going to plan for tomorrow? Or how did my day go today? Who are the kind of people I met? What did I cook? What kind of activity did I do? Where did I walk? How are my kids doing? How are my grandkids doing? So these are the kind of thoughts that really run through our mind. So on reflecting on this question, where Krishna says that, no, that is not exactly what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to think about not you in this role as doing all this, but you as an individual. Who is that I at the very highest level? Think about I from that level, not from the fact that I, who am a mother, I, who am a father, not in that point. So with that, what he's saying is that at the end of the day, that I that I'm thinking about is basically that ultimate principle of consciousness. So how can that I become that ultimate consciousness? Or how can that I recognize that I is that ultimate consciousness? So this is where Krishna really tries to tell us that we have to become, first of all, a person where all those thoughts are dying down. Those thoughts can die down, of course, only when my desires, or all the thoughts which is prompting those thoughts, that thing is nothing but it's starting from that vasanas, which then becomes a desire, and that desire then propels an action, and that action is becomes a kind of a thought, and it's with those thoughts that I go to bed today, right? So Krishna is saying that try to become that nishkama person. Kama means desire, nish means with no desire. So try to become that nishkama person. Only when you try to become that nishkama person will you be able to even go to higher levels of evolution within oneself. And when we do that, that's when I can get to really that absolute state of consciousness, which is who I am. And that consciousness is really that aspect of nirguna, absolutely no attributes at all. So that nirguna, that Jiva Paramatma Aikya, that one is where I'm trying to lead you to. But of course, for us, going to a state where I'm actually playing a role and going to a state where there's absolutely that consciousness is an extremely, of course, a very, very high jump, right? So therefore, in this chapter, in 8th chapter, what Krishna does is he actually takes us through the step of first recognizing that consciousness in a form. Consciousness is without form. So bringing that consciousness in a form called the Saguna Ishvara. So even Saguna Ishvara, yes, I can think about it, but then how do I do Upasana? How do I meditate? So which is why for us, we find that that form can basically be in two forms. Number one is really a form with attributes and everything, but taking that form of attributes then to a form without attributes. So which is where I will talk a little bit about it even later, but just to give you that idea of the step, which is because we are in this reflection part of it here. So we take that consciousness in the form of an Ishvara, and that Ishvara has a form. And this is where, because I'm a person with form, I'm a person with hands and legs, I'm a human being, I would like to look at also that consciousness principle in the form with hands and legs and everything. But even here, what we have in our own Sanatana Dharma, in our Hindu tradition, many different forms on whom we can meditate. So I have this picture here where really all forms, I just have a few of the forms here, whether it's Ganesha, whether it's Saraswati, Vishnu, Krishna, Rama, Durga, and especially during Navaratri time, perfect thing to talk about 8th chapter, because not only did we have the different forms, but in the Gulus, we had forms with so many different attributes and so many different ways we could show the forms of the whole world, right? So now, basically, the idea is we are trying to finitize, something which is infinite, consciousness which is infinite. We are trying to first bring into a finite form so that I can meditate. Isn't that amazing? I mean, we are shown the ultimate goal of infinitude, but we are not able to grasp it. We are not able to understand that. So we are bringing all these forms in a finite form. And from this finite form, we try to slowly and slowly get to that consciousness form. And so in this chapter, you will see by the 13th shloka, which we will hit today, the forms from our finite form of praying to the God, which we call this as one kind of an alambanam, pratima alambanam. Then we get to the pratika alambanam, which is like the Shivalingas, the Sarigramam, and everything. And from there on, we are taking all the way up to Omkara. Omkara, which is consciousness, which can be expressed in the form of Om. So that is the whole thing which we're going to. So this is why he says, remembrance of the Lord at the time of death. So yam yam bhavam smarati, tad bhavam only tam prapnoti. Bhavam. So as I start to meditate upon that Lord in the form, then when it comes to the time of my death, then Krishna is saying, Arjuna, now you see why I'm spending so much of time on that. Just the last question that you have asked, which is, how do I remember the Lord at the time of death? That can happen only when I start to doing that upasana on the Lord, which is in the finite form. I start to see the Lord in the various finite forms in the universe. And then slowly and slowly from there on, the next level, which is going to this pratika, alambanam, we said, and then going on to Omkara. So that's the reflection. I just giving a kind of a nutshell, the whole thing. So this picture we talked about before, I just throw it open here again. So when we think this yam bhavam smarati, when we think of something, is it really possible for us to merge? So this example that I give here is, I'm showing you this picture of a lady who's sitting in the chair. How can I really say that this person in front of me is also that consciousness? So normally this kind of thought, really it's very, very difficult for us to get to that level. But the whole idea is, as I go through this process of reflection, where I'm thinking about all the finite objects also in front of me is nothing but me, myself. When I do that, that is really the ultimate state of liberation. We need to get to that level of understanding. Even the person who's sitting in front of me is nothing but me, myself, who is taking that form of that lady on that chair. So we'll quickly, we went through all these shlokas, and that is what the shlokas here, Kim Tad Bhava, so this is the first question. And then we find the second question. In the first two questions, these 7 questions were asked. Then in the third and the fourth, we find Krishna is trying to explain each one of the questions. And the 6 technical terms we saw, which basically Krishna is telling Arjuna, don't worry about it. At the end of the day, it is nothing but that Brahma whom we are talking about. So we had gone through all this. And how does one attain Ishvara? Is one who remembers just a very simple thing. One who remembers Ishvara at the time of Ishvara goes to Ishvara. But is it really possible for us to remember Ishvara all the time? So that is where those other 6 things were given to us: the 6 Adhyatma, Adidaiva, Adhibhuta, Karma, and Karma. So ultimately, the idea is, all that is well and good, but what do I do? How can I constantly remember that Ishvara? So I can only remember that Ishvara when I recognize who I am, what is my role, and I continue to do my role to the best of ability, surrendering everything to Ishvara. Only then it is possible. And that is why this shlokas 5 through 11 really talks about all this. Is at the end of the day, we may all have lots of goals to fulfill in this day to day, month to month, week to week, and everything. But there is only one goal that matters as I am doing everything. For example, today, if I did not have this knowledge, I would set up a goal, but my goal would be more of a materialistic goal, more which is possibly, I would say, transient, temporary goals. But through Bhagavad Gita, we are seeing that Krishna is telling Arjuna that at the end of the day, only one goal matters, and that is to remember Ishvara. Keeping Ishvara in mind, doing everything. Otherwise, what we will do, we will actually have a goal of achieving something in this thing and then do something, right? So in chapter 8, he's slowly turning our mind, really focusing our mind to a goal which is much, much bigger. And that is the most important thing. So then the question may ask, we said, how do I know when I will pass away? Because obviously, birth and death is not really in our hands. So there may be many factors which can prevent us from thinking of Ishvara. So during this whole journey, but it could, and we talked about a lot of these factors too. But the idea is, when I'm hale and healthy, when things are going well for me, when I can start and put in tremendous amount of effort to aligning my goal to that Ishvara, then it is definitely possible. Because I have no idea, as I'm ailing or as I'm going in my age, what kind of factors are going to come personally for me. That I don't know. But what I can do is, when I'm healthy, I can actually start to change my mind, change my direction. So that's the thing in 5, which we went through. Yam Yam Vyapi Smaran. And then I put this up because today, each one of us are a small individual part of this big whole. And just like how this bubble is part of this huge ocean, and we are just like the bubble, thinking that we are this individual bubble. And for us, looking at this bubble, we know that everything is water, but the bubble doesn't know that, right? The bubble thinks it is an individual part of it. Just like each one of us, we are nothing but that consciousness. But when we live in this world, we don't act that way. And therefore, we always think I'm this individual. So that's the connection which I'm making here. And then shloka 7 is a very, very beautiful shloka. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha mayarpita mano buddhihi mam e vaishyasya asamshayaha. So what Krishna is giving absolute confidence to Arjuna, giving complete, telling him that at the end of the day, oh Arjuna, just keep thinking about me and then fight. So this is, of course, specifically for Arjuna, but the word yudhya should change for each one of us. So I need to think, what am I doing right now? I've been given all this human instrument to do something. How am I using this? And then do the best I can, and basically just surrender everything to that Ishvara. And if I do that, there is absolutely no doubt. Asamshayam, he says. So the sadhana is to pursue the 24/7 meditation totally with this here. Now, having said that, one may ask, of course, I'm a different kind of a person. I really cannot completely just sit and meditate. That's not what he's saying. Basically, bring about this aspect of Ishvara in and through everything. So actually in shloka number 8, he describes about the 3 types of meditation. And what are they? We will see one at a time. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to help us develop this kind of a thought habit where, again, just in one shloka, one can interpret so much. One can, really see the message which is coming across. The idea again is at the place that I am, the thought, we have this idea of doing so many different things. So here again, he's trying to show that thought habit has to change. In the mind, the thought has to be about Ishvara. And for that, there should be absolutely no distraction of the mind towards any other thing. So this is again the practice, what he's saying. And when I'm practicing that meditation, there should be actually, of course, no distraction. There should, and this can again happen is when during my work day, when I'm practicing everything, that whatever I'm doing, I'm only a nimitta karanam, I'm only an instrument, and everything that I'm doing is for that higher CEO, that higher boss who is making me do this work. When I have that buddhi, then what happens is, when I sit for meditation, then it leads to a point where there is no distraction. And in that stillness, I'll be able to connect myself to that higher self. So in order to do that, we need this chitta shuddhi and chitta ekagrata. Ekagrata means the focus of the mind. Chitta shuddhi is purification of the mind. The purification of the mind is trying to get to a state where there is no other thought. And there should be no dependence on anything external in meditation. In the absolute state of meditation, there should be no dependence at all. So that is where we are moving to. So that's where the shloka 8, where he's, of course, saying that there has to be a constant practice. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa, that is with the mind, na anya gamina. So where the mind is absolutely not moving to anything else. Paramam purusham divyam. So that only then can I even understand what that nature of the infinite is. I can try to understand. And that is what he's saying. What is that nature? He says it is divyam. It is totally resplendent, just absolute, pure knowledge, pure light. Divyam, of course, means brightness. There's so many attributes actually you can give to the word divyam. Here he's trying to say that supreme resplendent Purusha. Yati Partha Anuchintayan. So when we do that, I automatically go towards that. Then in Shloka 9 is where he goes into really the attributes of that Purusha. So if you look at this shloka here, it is more or less a meditation upon the Saguna Ishvara, Purusha. He's bringing the Purusha aspect here. But here he is actually giving much deeper meaning to that principle of consciousness. So before going here, I just wanted to pause a little bit and ask you, are there any thoughts or questions so far? Let me get my phone just to make sure. So we were on this we did the shloka about, the last one and before two. Basically, Kaving Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniyam Anusmarena Anusmareyatyah Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parastat. So he's trying to say about the qualities that Purusha, that consciousness is Kaving. Kaving basically means a poet, right? But Kaving also means completely omniscient. And Puranam doesn't necessarily mean just ancient, but it is timeless. Puranam, in fact, we had discussed this a while ago in another chapter about how that which is ever new, that is Purana. So it doesn't mean it's, the word Puranam, like I said, ancient means we would think it's old, but no. In fact, it's very interesting. Last night I was reading a news article here about how the national education policy of India, they are trying to now change some of the words in our history books because it gives a wrong connotation, especially in the area of Indian knowledge systems that I'm working on, which is trying to even remove the word ancient from the word and replace with something else, which is like timeless, Amazing how India is now slowly trying to bring all this ancient knowledge out, this timeless knowledge, and trying to incorporate into many things. So, Kaving Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniyam Anusmaret Yaha, that person who thinks about this consciousness, which is omniscient, which is timeless, and which is Anushasitaram, which is really the commander for all of us. And it is Anoraniyam. It is smaller. It is subtler. It is more. Anu means atom, right? But does that mean that consciousness is like an atom which is so small? No. What he's trying to say is just like an atom which I cannot see by my eyes, so too this consciousness is so subtle. So, and Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam. This one, it is the protector, it is a substratum, and it is incomprehensible. Incomprehensible, indicating that, does that mean that we, try as much as we can, I can never understand it? No. What he's trying to say is you can never, ever try to understand it by the equipments that I have, which I use to deal with this world. Achintya Rupam. So it is beyond that. And then it is Aditya Varnam. It is brilliant as the sun. When we look at something which gives us complete energy, it is the sun. Is there something bigger than that? No. So sun is the ultimate. So it is as brilliant, and Tamasa Parastat. Tamasa, which is beyond ignorance. Tamasaha, darkness representing ignorance. So these are the things that we talked about. And then Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam, Tamasa Parastat. So then in Shloka 10, having explained so much, he's trying to whet our appetite by, don't you really want to pursue something like this? So with that, we did, I think we did the Shloka 2 last time. Prayana kale manasa achalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva dhruvar madhye pranam aveshya samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam. So prayana kale, so at the time of death, with the mind that is unshaken. So, Krishna is coming to Arjuna's question about how do I meditate at the time of death, right? So he's saying, Prayana kale manasa, with the mind that is totally achalena, bhaktya, with complete tuning of the mind. Bhaktya yuktaha, which is yoking the mind, or like I said, tuning. Yoga balena cha eva, It's only by the power of yoga, by the complete yoking of the mind. And here, he's saying it's so much like it's almost bringing the entire energy up there. Bhruvor madhye pranam aveshya samyak. Bhruvor madhye, in the middle of the two eyebrows, and having placed a whole prana. So again, what he's trying to show here is, again, this might look as an advanced level of pranayama, but how can somebody just focus the energy in such a way that all the energy, as it were focused only to this one point between the eyebrows? To that extent, he's saying, the focus and concentration has to be there. So when a person does that, sahatam param purusham upaiti divyam. At that time, the person can really experience that ultimate Purusha. So that is what he's trying to say in here. So in Shloka 11 now, so having now given a kind of a technique. So Shloka 10 was basically trying to give us a technique of meditating on that Purusha, right? So having given that, now Krishna begins this topic of meditating on Ishvara's name. So this shloka which is coming up is also in the same kind of a meter as the last two. And here, what he does is he sets the stage by giving us the three kinds of people whose mind is now set on the Supreme Brahman. Okay. And they're the kind of people who have recognized that the world really has nothing much to offer. Okay. And how do I get to that state where I'm focusing only on the Brahman? So he gives the three types of people who do that. So, we are all into looking for role models. So where do I go for my role model? So here, this is what he's trying to say. Vedavid, Yatayaha, and Brahmachari. A Vedavid is a person who has spent his life studying the Vedas. Vedavid. Vid means to know. Veda means the book of knowledge. So such a person who knows the imperishable Brahman. Again, knowing indicating a person who has a lot of the bookish knowledge and who's convinced. Such a person who studied Vedas very deeply. Then Yatayaha. Yatayaha are those ascetics who are very self-controlled. Those are free from all attachment. These are, the sannyasis who have taken the vow to practice spiritually. They may not necessarily have the book knowledge, but they have understood about what is that ultimate state that they want to go. So Yatayaha, who practice full-time who practice spirituality on a full-time basis. They are sannyasis. So they, since they are sannyasis, they don't really have like us, a home and family that they have to look at. So they can practice intense sadhanas. So they are the Yatayaha. And then Brahmachari. Brahmachari these are sadhakas who abide by the rules of Brahmacharyam. Brahmacharyam is again the control, which is celibacy, we say. And these, basically, these are people who study in Gurukulas, and they are on the path to studying more and getting into that, going through the level of Brahmachari to Sannyasa, where they skip the whole Grahastha. So these are the three people who have consciousness in front of them in that kind of a goal. So these are the people he's talking about in this shloka. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti. Vishanti Yadyatayo Vitaragaha. Vishanti Yadyatayo Vitaragaha. Yadikshanto Brahmacharyam Charanti. Yadikshanto Brahmacharyam Charanti. Tatte Padam Sangagrahena Pravakshye. tatte padam sangha grahena pravakshye. So he's saying, yat aksharam veda vidaha vadanti. So declared as imperishable by the knowers of Vedas. So the Vedavit people who have recognized that Brahma as imperishable. There is a kid here in my who's joined in the first year. His name is Aksharam Atman, Akshar Atman. Amazing, isn't it? So every time when I use his name, I think about some of these shlokas here. So yat aksharam veda vida vadanti vishanti yat yatayaha vita ragaha. So those ascetics who have given up complete, given up their likes and dislikes. Ragaha, of course, means likes. Vita, which is gone. So vishanti yat yataya vita ragaha. Yat ichhantayaha brahmacharyam charanti. So that person who out of his own accord has taken up brahmacharyam. Yat ichhantaha brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. That goal I will declare to thee in brief. So he's telling us, sometimes I feel this is like when I went to Sandipani and, we as Grahasthas went to sit on a course which was actually meant for the brahmacharis who are desiring to study about Brahman and go into sannyas, right? So it's like that. So Krishna is trying to now tell us that goal, which is which is usually sort of reserved for these three people. But he's being so magnanimous and trying to tell us that, hey, all of you Grahasthas, now that you've lived this life, do you really want to know what is there beyond everything that you have now done a great job in taking care of the whole society, taking care of all these three people? That is what the Grahasthas ashram is, right? That ashram, which is so very, which is probably the best of all the ashrams. Now he's giving us that idea. So in Shloka 12, he's kind of again giving us another process about how we can meditate upon Ishvara. So he outlines a series of steps here. Sarvadvarani sanyamya, Sarvadvarani sanyamya, Manohridi nirudhya cha, Mudnyadhayatmana pranaha, Astito yogadharanam. So he's saying, again, like I said, there are actually the steps that are outlined here. First is Sarva Dwarani Sanyamya. So having closed all the gates, we know what those gates are, right? Which is essentially all our sense organs through which we have things entering into us. So Sarva Dwarani Sanyamya, Manaha Hridi Nirudhya cha. So having confined the mind in the heart. So in a sense, taking the mind which is outside, now bringing it back and focusing it inside in the heart. So the heart, the Hridaya, in Upanishads, actually in Kaivalya Upanishad, it goes into a lot of details about how heart is where that consciousness is, So here he's saying, bringing that heart, bringing the mind into the heart. So mana hridi nirudhya, murdhani adhaya atmanaha pranam. Now then, having fixed the life breath in the head, again, this is a way of focusing all the energy. Astitaha yoga dharanam. So engage in the practice of concentration. So again, this is another process step, just like we saw one of the process steps in shloka number 10. This is one more of the process steps of meditation. So the 4 steps are basically control of the sense of perception, right? Reducing the number of thoughts basically to one, and then directing this complete life force. When we say, prana doesn't mean just the taking in and out of the breath, but it is all the 5 pranas, prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana, all of them. So directing that entire force of that prana to one of them, which he says, directing it to that one thing where, bhrod madhye, he had talked about, right? So focusing that complete prana and continuing to remain in that position for an extended period of time. So that is what he's saying here. So the first step, of course, like I said, is to control the sense of organs, which he calls as gates. And in chapter 6, we saw a lot of shlokas where he talks about selecting of the right spot. How should my mind be? How should I have very little distraction? Where my mind doesn't get thinking about what is outside. So that is the first step. The second one is, like I said, to confine the mind into the heart, meaning that slowly, I need to reduce the number of thoughts and bringing it to one thought, and even that one thought to merge with that consciousness. So that can, of course, happen only when I practice japa for a long time. I practice japa, which japa is a technique of bringing the thoughts to one thought, right? So japa is very, very essential. In fact, in December, I'm organizing one conference on Indian psychology and mental health. And it is so nice to see the students looking into various stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, connecting it to Bhagavad Gita, and then coming up with, intervention modules. In the Western psychology, for example, when you go to a therapist, the therapist will prescribe, certain exercises or anything, or, talk to you and make you feel good and all that, right? But we go even much, much, much more deeper. And this is why Indian psychology is becoming a big thing in India now. And in that, japa is one of the intervention modules that we're trying to prescribe here. So the third, like I said, the third and the fourth steps actually requires a little more, guidance from a master. Basically, it is not an easy thing to say that I'm going to control my prana and bring my prana to the center in front of my eyebrows, right? So if we don't do it correctly, it can be pretty injurious. I'm saying injurious as a mild word. So this part of it, controlling the prana, is a very important aspect. And once I really control this prana and I'm able to have focus on this energy part of it, then it is possible for me to stay in that position of meditation for a long time. So that is what this shloka really is, an exercise or meditation shloka. And then he talked about, in this thing, we talked about concentration, yoga dharanam, concentration. So what do I concentrate on? And this is where we talked about the alambanam part of it, alambanam, or something on which I can focus my attention. In the beginning of the session, we talked about how, at the end of the day, I need to merge myself into that higher consciousness. And that higher consciousness is formless. So then how do I conceive of that formless God, right? This is why there's two kind of alambanams is prescribed. One of them is a pratima alambanam. Pratima alambanam is that God with attributes. I showed the pictures of various Hindu gods, and each one of them basically represents that to me. And you can see that even in Vishnu Sahasranama, for example, Kshiro Danva Pradesho Shuchimani Vrasat Saikatai Moktikanam, Mala Klupta Samastam, then Mega Shamam Pita Kautsevasam Shrivat Sangam, Kautsubo Vasitangam. So here you see, Vishnu's portrayal in the various forms, in the various attributes. So when I say Vishnu Sahasranamam, which is a great, of course, which is in line with what this 8 chapters saying, which is focusing on Ishvara with attributes. So when I look at, for example, Rama, that picture of Rama, the way he walks, the way his smile, everything brings such a feeling within me. And again, I want to tell you this, the last 10 days here in CEV, we had our BA Sanskrit students out of their own accord. They themselves decided that for 10 days, we want to do Rama Leela every night for half an hour. And the girl who acted as Rama, and if any one of you are interested in seeing this episode, it's just what touched me was in this day and age, these kids, they could basically take these 10 days as holidays and, just have a good time, right? But no, on their own, they decided that there's about 8 to 10 kids, and they would take different roles in Ramayana. Somebody would be Hanuman one day, another day the same person would be Angad, and even Ravana and everything. They would just change roles, and they would really, and they didn't even care if anybody came or not. They said, we want to do portray Ramayana, and we want to do some of these episodes. So, and just looking at them and how much they got into the role was just so beautiful. But you could really, I wanted to mention that because even when you watch them, you could see that aspect of that alambanam, which is, pratima alambanam. And so pratika alambanam is when the symbol does not have any organs or limbs like the Shivalinga here, or for that matter, the spatika, what do you call that? Saligramams, the various saligramams, or even for Ganesha Puja, when I do this in turmeric, and then you dissolve the turmeric, right? So these are all the pratika alambanam. Basically, these are also ways in which I can actually focus my attention. Now, all these are, of course, again, steps for us, because we need some kind of an alambanam to focus my concentration. And that is why this is given. And even when we do the arati, for example, that flame is an alambanam for us. So ultimately, the idea is this should lead us to that Om. So this is the next higher level of focusing a concentration. And in Mundaka Upanishad, etad ek vaksharam brahma, etad ek vaksharam paramam, etad ye vaksharam jnatva yo yadichati tasya tat. So he's talking about this alambanam, etad alambanam shreshtam, etad alambanam paramam, etad alambanam jnatva brahma loki mahiyate. The idea is that Omkar is the alambanam, and this alambanam is given in this Katha Upanishad. Sorry, I said Mundaka, it's Katha. And so actually Omkar is talked about in Mundaka also, and also in Taittiriya Upanishad. So ultimately, this is where he's asking us to focus. So Sarva Dwarani Sanyamya Mana Hridi Nirudhya Murdhani Adhaya Atmanaha Pranam Asitaha Yoga Dharanam. So this is the, and so this brings us to shloka number 13, where he is now talking about the meditation on Om. Okay, so we will do the shloka now, we will chant the shloka and just review it slightly, but there is a little more information. This is about Om that we need to learn, and we need to review it rather, and we will do that, but I'll chant the shloka. Om ityekaksharam brahma, Om ityekaksharam brahma, Vyaharan mam anusmaran, Vyaharan mam anusmaran yah prayati tyajen deham yat prayati tyajan deham yah prayati tyajan deham sayati paramam gatim sayati paramam gatim. So, having used the Pratima and the Pratik Alambanams, now we go to the next Alambanam, which is the Om. And so, Om iti eka aksharam Brahma. So, Om is the one syllable Brahman. If I have to say, if I have to give a name for Brahman and call Brahman, I can just call him Om. And I know many of you would have heard the name Om given to a lot of the kids. So Om, Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran, uttering this and remembering me. Again, going back to the question of Arjuna, right? About Prayana Kale, what do I remember? It is this Om, Vyaharan Mam Anusmaran, he who departs thus when leaving this body, Yaprayati Tyajan Deham, Sayati Paramam Gatim. Such a person attains that ultimate goal. So with that, we will, next week, we will discuss a little more on Om, but we will move on to the next shlokas. So I'll see you on November 1st. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Let me stop the recording.